anymore, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. Now notice this. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with a sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. This is an equivalent of the mighty angel coming down.
That's Jesus.
This is the equivalent. And this is the one who says he speaks with all power and all authority in both heaven and earth. And Joshua fell upon his face to the earth and did worship. In the book of Daniel, where Daniel meets this same angel, he falls down on his face. Isaiah meets him in Isaiah chapter 6, falls down on his face. Ezekiel meets him and falls down on his face. John in the book of Revelation meets him and falls down on his face. And brothers and sisters, in this history right here, when those Millerites who came out of this history of the seven thunders, when they follow this angel by faith into the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary on October 22nd, 1844, trust me, when these brethren understood the events that led to the closing of the 2300 days, they knew that they had met the angel that Joshua had met. He said, And nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. It was here that Christ would appear as captain of the Lord of the hosts, leading down to the end of the world. Jericho represents the fall of Babylon, and Edersheim points this out. And for this reason, God allowed a remnant of those nations. No, that's not the place. So Israel could only retain the land and complete its conquest by the same faith in which they had first entered it. For faith is never a thing of the past. And for this reason, God allowed a remnant of those nations to continue in the land to prove Israel by them. And in Daniel chapter 7, that the beasts, it says, had their life continued for a time. The same as the Canaanites that were in Canaan. God didn't remove them and destroy them all at once. But in the prophecy of Daniel chapter 7, we know that the very things that would lead to the forming of the pagan power under the fourth Roman kingdom and then to the fifth kingdom of Bible prophecy, which would be the papacy, which is just the other half of the fourth kingdom, would come about because God was going to test his people. And so he did test them into the 1260 years. And at the end of that test, when he removed the power of the papacy, he began a series of process where life and knowledge was increased to bring them down to another test. And so God's dealings with men are always the same in every age. He never changes. It says here that, and for this reason God allowed a remnant of those nations to continue in the land to prove Israel by them. So that as Joshua had forewarned them, in Joshua 23 verses 10 and 16 and Judges 2 verse 3, faithfulness on their part would lead to sure and easy victory, while the opposite would lead in a terrible national disaster.
Yes, I remember reading.
Terrible national disaster. Side by side with these two facts, there is yet a third, and that the most important, the unchanging faithfulness of Jehovah, his unfailing pity and loving kindness, according to which when Israel was brought low and again turned to him, he raised them up judges and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judges. So we're going to close with that, and what I'm trying to express to you today is that in these histories, they lead down to the most important event in sacred history, and that's the opening up of the sounding of the seventh trumpet. Now, under the sounding of the seventh trumpet, I want to repeat this. I didn't bring a book along today that I wished I had, and I'll bring it next week. But it's a book by J.N. Andrews. And when I prepared this for the sermon 3 weeks ago now, I had read this book by him in the past. Not in a too far distant past, but a couple of years back. You know, after you read some things, you don't remember everything you read, and so I'd forgotten some of the material that I'd read in that book. But in between preparing the notes for that sermon I gave on the crossing of the Jordan and standing on the Sea of Glass, I make this statement about the sounding of the seventh trumpet, and it says, the seventh trumpet comes at the close of Daniel 8:14 in the 2,300 days, October 22nd, 1844. There are very important events that are part of the history of the 2,300 days, and the seven trumpets take place under the sounding, or the seventh trumpet takes place under the sounding of the, excuse me, let me read this again. There are very important events that are part of the history of the 2,300 days, and the seven trumpets that take place under the sounding of the seventh trumpet on October 22nd, 1844, these are not necessarily in chronological order. I make that note before I give you the list of events. Well, J.N. Andrews says almost the same identical thing in his book called The Judgment and its Events and Their Order. And in it, when he makes the statement that they're not in their chronological order, he begins to give you a list of things that takes place under the sounding of the seventh trumpet. Now, I list more things than he does in his book, and I was quite surprised when I read the book this week that the conclusions that he and I came to were the same. Now, it's not because I'm so wise, and neither was it because Andrews is such a wise guy. It's because the conclusion we came to was because we were looking at this history. And so we came to the same conclusion. So under the sounding of the seventh trumpet, these are some of the things that takes place. The opening up of the investigative judgment, the mystery of God is finished, the end of all time prophecies, the close of probation on the foolish virgins. The third angel's message arrives in history. Under the sounding of the seventh trumpet, we see the plagues. We will see the second coming, the millennium, the second death, the judgment of the wicked, the sanctuary truth, the Sabbath reform movement, health reform, the door is closed and the door is open, Revelation 3, verses 7 and 8. We see the two harvests at the end of the world, Revelation 14, 13 through 20. We see the sealing of the 144,000. We see the mark of the beast, the Sunday law. We see the time of trouble. We see the close of human probation. We see the rise of Islam on 9/11 in the year 2001, which is under the seventh trumpet and under the third woe. It stands in its place right here and does its same role as what took place under the sixth trumpet and the close of the second woe, is when Islam is brought into the history of these woes. In the second trumpet, it's brought in at the close of the second woe, but in this history, it's brought in close to the close of the third woe, because the third woe begins in this history right here, and it's the angering of the nations, and it's progressive, and it moves forward. And under the angering of the nations, right here, where the third woe has its biggest impact, is once again where we see Islam come into the third woe. And where we do, some of us have made the statement that Islam is the arrival of the third woe in history. More accurately, you might say that it's that place within the third woe where we begin to see the test, once again, brought in to the people of God. It's here that if we will look back, we will examine the history of the first angel's message, leading up to the second angel's message, leading up to the third angel's message. And it's here, in this history, under the loud cry, where, and I will say this the way it was said this morning, it's where that other angel meets or joins the third angel. In the loud cry. Of Revelation 18, verses 3 and 4. Some people call it when the third angel joins the fourth, but that's not accurate. Ellen White never calls it the fourth angel. She makes the declaration, that other angel that meets or joins the third angel. And so we want to recognize that in these histories, there's far more here in Adventism that we really recognize as Seventh-day Adventists today at the end of the world. And my hope is that it took me some time to grasp some of the things I tell in these Bible studies. And for me, I'm slow. It takes me a lot to learn this stuff. I mean, but some of you maybe been blessed with more talents in the area of grasping these things. But I can tell you this, unless you study them for yourself, you won't grasp any of it. So you must make the effort. So I do hope that the effort will be made.
When it says that other angel,
Yeah.
which angel?
The fourth
Revelation
one.
18:1 through 4. This is that other angel. Yes, it's the one that lights the whole earth with his glory. Go to Revelation chapter
Yes,
18.
Jesus.
Yeah, Revelation chapter 18. It says, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. It's here that Ellen White says that she calls him that other angel that joins the third angel. And many of us in these studies, doesn't matter who we are, we've all used the term when the third angel, when the fourth angel joins the third. Well, that's inaccurate. The Spirit of Prophecy never describes him as the fourth angel. Adventism has done that. But, so, to be on the record, it's when that other angel meets and joins the third angel's message that this loud cry is going to be given after the introduction of the Sunday law. And so what we have here, when we compare, what we see is that on August 11th, 1840, the Millerites began a testing process. And those who failed to receive the first angel's message on August 11th, 1840, standing in the face of the fulfillment of a time prophecy under a Bible prophecy directly related with Islam under a woe, and in 911 where we see the same thing, but it's not a time prophecy, but there are two things that are the same. That is that it involves Islam, and we believe that it's here where the test is underway, whether when you're a Seventh-day Adventist, that you are going to believe the first angel's message is once again the subject of Bible prophecy. And if you believe that, then you're preparing yourself for what the Millerites were preparing themselves for, and that was the fall of Babylon in their history. And when the Sunday law comes for the Seventh-day Adventist Church and for the Protestant churches of the United States, for those who are inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they have more light than the Protestant churches outside the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so the test will come to them first, just like it did to the Millerites. The Millerites were tested right here, and the rest of the Protestants were tested coming up right here. The world will be tested right here, under the loud cry. And when the world passes or fails its test, whichever side of the issue you end up on, that's when probation closes. The close of probation. And that's marked right here. In this long history from the crossing of the Jordan. Probation closes. And here is where we see that the 7 last plagues are poured out. This is what the sounding of the 7th trumpet is warning us about. It's a warning message. The most fearful warning ever given to mortals to give to other men is the third angel's message. Because it's coming down to the pouring out of the 7 last plagues. And if you are the recipient of those plagues, the next thing you will meet is in the resurrection of the wicked outside the city and the lake of fire. That's why this is the most most fearful message ever given to mortals.